Okay, we are in the middle of the Maamar of the Rebbe. Tavshin Daled Mem, Basi Legani. We're in the middle of Eis Gimel. There are different copies of it, so there's different page numbers and everything. But we're in the middle of Eis Gimel. Okay, the Rebbe is writing that the Aveda of the Jew is to transform Klipa to Kedusha. That's the Dira B'Tachtenim. And he said that's why the Yidden are called Tzivas Hashem, because the Tzivat Tzava is the level of Mesiras Nefesh. In order to elevate the sparks of Mitzrayim and the ultimate level of Helam V'Hester, when Elokus is concealed, because it's called Teva Tuba B'Yamsuf, so then the job of the Jew is to reveal that level of Kedusha. So he says now like this, in the middle of Eis Gimel, a little bit past midway. Amnam Ayidei Aveda the Tzivas Havaya, through the Aveda of a Jew in Tzivas Havaya, the Bittul the Kabbalah's Earl, through the Bittul of acceptance of the yoke, blind faith. And that's why he says Tzvakes, Tzives is the word Chayil, a soldier. We elevate and refine the sparks, or misalim the kedusha, and they become elevated to kedusha. In other words, there are sparks of kedusha that are sunken in the world of klipas neiga, because shosh klipas atmeis we cannot elevate, but klipas neiga, the sparks of kedusha are there. We're able to elevate them. How? Through bittul of mesiras nefesh. I know, what does it mean? How do we elevate the sparks? We take the sparks of Kedusha out of the ultimate concealment, and then they become part of Shem Havaya. In other words, we take the sparks from the hidden level of Elokim, and we make it Tzivas Havaya, through the level of Tzava, through the level of Mesiras Nefesh and Bittul, Chayol, so then you come to the level of Havaya, which is above nature. The Seder Aveiduhu, and the Aveid is as follows. Even while we find ourselves in the darkness of Golus. So the question is, if we're in the darkness of Golus, how can we undo a Golus? Your prisoner cannot free himself. So how are we able to do it? Like the Pasuk says, that even when the Jews were in the Mak of Cheshech, when it was a very deep level of darkness, that they were able to tap it, that's how thick it was. Nevertheless, by the Yidden was Erba Meshreisa, meaning, it wasn't only in the 4 cubits where the Jews were, the Medrash says like this, by the Mak of Cheshech, why did Hashem make darkness for a few reasons. One is to bury all the Jews that complained about going out. They didn't want to go out, so they died then. The second reason, it says that a Jew, in those 3 days, or 6 days, went into all the Egyptians' houses. They saw where everything was. And then they came to them and said, we don't have it. They said, yeah, we saw it in your house. So the Medrash says when the Jew, not only was the Jew in Goshen was their light, but when a Jew, wherever a Jew went, if he went into an Egyptian's house, for him there was light. By the Egyptians was a tapped level of Cheshech, and by the Jew it says, yeah, but the Jews were able to have light, regular. Even in a house of Mitzri, the Ard would go in with him. And shine to him. All the things that were hidden, the barrels are in the hidden places. And that was in preparation, like we said, the Natu Mitzrayim, to empty out Egypt. Because the Jews, when they went out of Egypt, right, like it says in today's Chita, the Shali Yishir Mishchenta, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu they should ask for. And it better Konitzu to Shoyu b'Mitzrayim. And then they had to elevate all the sparks of Kedusha that were in Mitzrayim. And then by Biza Sayam, when the Egyptians drowned in the sea, so there was a lot of jewelry that used to adorn the animals with jewelry. So it says, the Medrash says, the Biza Sayam, the spoils that they got by Kriyas Yamsuf, was more than they got in Mitzrayim. It was an unbelievable amount. What does it mean spiritually? Those sparks that were not ultimately elevated when they left Egypt became ultimately elevated by Kriyas Yamsuf. Because it was still super concealed. They couldn't elevate it spiritually, even more than the sparks which were in Mitzrayim that were revealed through Or. Pari himself brought it. Like the Medrash says, Upari Hikriv, Pari came closer to fight the Eden, right? So it says, Pari Hikriv es Yisrael Libon she Yisrael Avim Shebeshvayim. Through these miracles, Pari himself brought the Jews closer to Hashem. He says, Sheyuchl Yisrael Levared Bebiza Seyam. And all that was Achana L'matan Torah. Like it said, Vayaseh Moshe Yisrael Miyamsuf, Shehisiya Esim, he forced them to leave Biza Sayam L'matan Torah.
Exactly what's happening now.
Mamish. Now, so therefore, he's saying this. The whole concept of Mitzrayim was to elevate the sparks. The Jews did it, then they did it through Cheshach, then those sparks they couldn't elevate through Cheshach, they elevated by Kriyas Yamsuf, and all that was a Hachon of Matan Torah, which was Hashem giving us the ability to elevate Gashmias. Then we built a Mishkan. That's all the level of Hisapcha and Skafi and Hisapcha, breaking evil, transforming evil to a level that we elevated to Kedusha. That's the Aved of Tzivus Havaya, Legalis ulevad, to reveal, refine, Ulaalis, and elevate. The Nitzut, the Shaya B'tachlis Hester, which were the ultimate level of concealment. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, when the Medrash says Dira v'tachteinim, it means tachteinim shein tachten lamata himenu, the lowest that there's nothing possibly lower. So the Alter Rebbe the Rebbe is writing here Mitzrayim, there was a level of things that couldn't elevate the Chatchila. That means it was so low, it was so concealed at the beginning, but even by Makas Cheshach, the Jews couldn't elevate it. Then what happened by Biza Siyam, they were able to elevate it. Which means that's the achon of creating a Dira B'Tachteinim by elevating all the sparks that are the most difficult to elevate.
So the regular Jew can elevate?
Not Shosh Kibbutz Tmeis. But we elevate Shosh Kibbutz Tmeis through Klipas Nega.
So Rabbi, 208 was elevated.
202.
202 was elevated.
And 86 left. Was part of that day, 202. Yeah. You're just saying the sparks, so that the same 202 sparks that they couldn't elevate the Mitzrayim, they elevated by Kriyas Yamsuf. Why? It's a very simple thing. Kriyas Yamsuf was a greater revelation of Elokus. If it was a greater revelation of Elokus, they had more power to elevate even those things that before were concealed. They weren't able to elevate.
Wasn't the whole purpose of Kriyas Yamsuf for Hashem to show the future?
The purpose of Kriyas Yamsuf is to reveal a level of Elokus.
The level that was not revealed.
Correct. As a preparation for Matan Torah.
So how was that? How did the Yidden have any ability to elevate anything at that? Hashem was showing them, here is future, here is what you do not see.
Not what you don't see. The hidden levels of Elokus, which are normally not revealed, now we have the strength to elevate even things that we couldn't elevate because now we have a greater level of revelation.
Rabbi, in terms of miracles and revelation, what's the difference between the 10 Makot and Kriyas Yamsuf?
Kriyas Yamsuf was a greater revelation of godliness.
Really?
Well, if you take even in the Haggadah that we say, what did the Chatumim say to Pare? Etzba Lekimi. It said Etzba Lekimi. By Kriyas Yamsuf it said Vayar Yisrael as a Yod Hagdolah. That's why in the Haggadah you have the three different opinions. In Egypt were 10, Kriyas Yamsuf were 50. or 40 and 200, or 50 and 250. Because Kriyas Yamsuf, relatively speaking, was a level they saw Yad, not Etzba. Yad, and not only Yad, they saw Yad HaGedolah. So it's a much greater,
But there is other Nisim and Niflot in the Torah.
not as great as Kriyas Yamsuf.
Really?
And Kriyas Yamsuf was there as a preparation and a hachana to Matan Torah. Tanei Chavay what?
How did they elevate the sparks if they were in a commanded? They didn't have the Torah. There was no mitzvah at that time.
Very good. So it says, why did Hashem make the Jews have all this wealth? Because they needed to build a Mishkan. To build a Mishkan was a very expensive building. Good architecture. I don't know about the architecture, but there was a lot of gold, very expensive things. That was the purpose of the Jews taking out those. So the Jews, after Matan Torah, what they got out of Egypt then was ultimately elevated when they built the Mishkan.
So it was elevated later, much later.
Correct. Not much later. It was not that many years later. I mean, it's half a year later. Okay, so this is so far not bad. So now he says, Allah Ian to understand Shagam ha'arum mutfa behestim elam Yosef. He says to understand this concept that the or which is completely concealed. How can a Jew reveal these hidden sparks of godliness which are super concealed? What is the Avodah? How do we have the ability to elevate it? So he says in the Alzam, Mevayed Balilul Perik Yudalit, which is the Perik the Rabbi writes of this year. Shnasa Yudalit B'Pama Shniya. The second time around, Perik Yudalit Kiflaim L'Tishia, and now the Rabbi says Perik Yudalit of the previous Rebbe's Maamar is to explain how is it possible that the Avodah of the Jew, right, is to create a dir b'tachtenim, and he said is by elevating the sparks which are concealed, and the more the sparks are concealed, meaning the more tachtenim it is, the more the Avodah of the Jew is to elevate it. He says, he explains like this. It says you give existence to everything. The ha'adas erdolaki. Because this revelation of Elokus comes down, what's the purpose? To give life to every physical thing that exists. The Rebbe wrote in Siman Chof. By the way, tomorrow's Chof Dalet Tevis. The famous Igeris of the Alter Rebbe, which is a very, very big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe in the whole concept of Yesh Miyayin, is Siman Chof. The Alter Rebbe wrote that right before he passed away. So it's connected to Chof Dalet Tevis even.
You translate what you just said.
There's one of the, in Tanya there's 5 parts.
Right.
So there's a part called Igeris HaKadosh, which were letters the Alter Rebbe wrote to various different people. So the 20th one is called Siman Chof, but it's called Siman. Siman Al, Siman Beis. In the early parts, the Perak Aleph, Perak, it's called Siman. So over there, the Alter Rebbe explains in Perak Chof, the Alter Rebbe explains that the whole concept of creation comes from Or, from light. And this light, though, is Me'en Amor, has the power of the source. Okay, and he elaborates. He says, what does he say over there? That a revelation of a revelation of a revelation. In every creation, in the 3 worlds, Bri, Tzir, and Nasir. That limited revelation of godliness is the Ar V'Chayes Eloki, is this godly revelation that comes into every creation. In other words, a lower creation means there was a greater concealment of God. Not such a limited creation is not such a limited revelation of God. In fact, we learned this last night in Tanya, in Perek Lamed Ches. So the Alter Rebbe says that you have Daimim Tzemei Chaim Medaber. There's a power of Elokus even in the rock, in the stone. But that stone's power is much less than the revelation of godliness in a plant that grows or in an animal that moves or in a person. There's still a power of Hashem in it. That comes into the lowest of the lowest levels. In the super low, like it says, Im Esek Shemayim, if I make the heaven, you are there. And even when there's Sheol, which is the lowest of lowest levels, you're there. Meaning, that this level, revelation of a revelation, meaning a concealment, but it's a revelation of Hashem that becomes concealed. That comes down into everything in the world. From level to level. Ad madreg is to the lowest of lowest creatures. Yeah? And he says, kol adam va'adam gama pashut and he writes over there that the lowest of the, now the Rebbe says this in the Gersa Kodesh, it's all level of the language of the Gersa Kodesh, that the Rebbe says even the lowest of a low person can understand this. The lowest person can understand that without Hashem's power, the world can't exist. Because it's Yesh Miyayin, right? It's not you build a table. You're taking nothing. The nature of nothing is to be nothing. In order to be something, it has to be a constant power in it to make it something. Otherwise, it goes back to nothing. So therefore, even a simple person can understand that there are higher creations in God, in world, which means they have a greater power of Hashem, and there are lower creations in the world that have a lower power of Hashem. And then you can even have total evil. You can have total evil that also has the power from Hashem in it. Like we mentioned last night. Hamas, the lowest of the lowest evil, their existence is Hashem. Who's making them exist? It's Hashem. Without Hashem's power in them, they don't exist. They're the lowest of the lowest evil. But obviously, the concealment of godliness in total evil is much greater than the concealment of God in Kedusha or in Klipa Snaiga or things like that.